plans. I suppose I'd love to double click now or double down and drill down into some of the detail, Rick, and talk about things like, what are your typical KPIs that you use when doing business planning, both here and in previous roles? What are some of the partner types you need to deal with, distributors, or in your case, aggregators, the different, whether it's an MSP or VAR, how do you deal with those differently? Are they similar KPIs, different KPIs? How do you manage all of that, as part of your planning process? And then we touched on it a little bit there in the last question, but it's that whole piece around how do you drive that collaboration and accountability, Rick? So I know there's probably a lot there, Rick, but if you can have a stab at that, please.
Yeah, no. So I think it's a journey, right? And the journey with the business plan, right? We've all kind of, looked at all the different pieces, and we've all been through the spreadsheet all the way to the automation piece of it. For Broadcom, our business plans are for our top partners, just like Jessica said, right? It's not for all partners. We have a huge ecosystem, right? And when you're manually doing some things, that makes it even more complicated, right? When you automate it, obviously, you can do some things differently. But I think the key is each route to market and the KPIs that you're using, like at Broadcom, we have probably 6 different routes to market. And you're looking at different pieces to the business plan too, right? Especially for Broadcom. So we look at the sales piece of it. We look at the enablement piece of it. We look at the, delivery piece of it from a services perspective. I do a lot from a enablement perspective in the business plan, but you got to tie the marketing, the business, and all the different pieces in the plan and making sure that you're staying in touch with that partner so that you can use KPIs, right? Like, what certifications do they have? What dollars are going towards those certifications, right? Making sure that you're on the same page as you're driving that, right? So at Broadcom, I think, once again, working with and having all those different routes to market, all the way from OEMs, GSPs, GSIs, down to resellers, distributors, aggregators, each one of those is a different business, which means you got to have a plan to drive that business, and that business needs to make sure that there's an understanding on both sides, right? We talked about that. That falls down a lot if you don't have the correct data. And then the KPIs, once again, for us, that plays into how we, incent our partners and how we pay our partners and how they, align with us and agree with us and move forward, right? So the more that you're invested in that plan, the more data points you have, the KPIs that you're looking at are obviously going to drive that business for the partner and for yourself. And if that's properly going in the right direction, right, with QBRs and things like that, then you're going to be on the same page and things are going to be good. Once again, if you're not and you have all kinds of issues, then once again, that's causing problems with those businesses. And I think once again, too, as you work through business plans and the KPIs that you're using, you've got to have a really good handle on that and everybody understanding it, right? Because you can have a KPI and if people don't understand what those are, and I've seen this constantly through my career, is you get on the phone, you talk about it, you may put it someplace, but if they really don't understand it and you don't get them to the point where you're agreeing on that plan, then you're kind of butting heads working against it instead of working together. So I think that's the key. And obviously, like I said, from a KPI perspective, we've got a lot of different things when it comes to MDF, funded heads, how we pay partners, how we give them benefits around education, once again, driving that business. And that's all stemmed from the business plan, right? And having that all in a platform that's automated, once again, instead of running around in spreadsheets with 50 different people trying to collect those KPIs and keep them straight, you can do it in one platform and have that at the access of all the different individuals that are going to be involved in that planning.
Yeah, and that's super, Rick. Yeah, no, very insightful. Thanks. So, Rick, just something that kind of tweaked my interest there. When you said there on the collaboration piece, and sometimes you butt heads, how do you deal with that? Because partners are very broad and varied, as you said. You have 6 different go-to-market motions. Is that an individual getting on the phone? How do you manage that whole thing to get aligned on the KPIs? Like, even if it's as simple as revenue, how do you get aligned on something like that?
No. So once again, there's a lot of onboarding that goes in this process, right? I don't care if it's for enablement, sales, and you have to reiterate what you're trying to get across and the understanding of the program, right? Understanding the enablement, the marketing, and making sure everybody's on the same page. When you're butting heads a little bit, it's because you haven't had that communication or you're not aligned with the data. So once again, it's not so much you're bumping heads to the fact where it's a negative thing, you're bumping heads because you just don't understand what you're putting in the plan. And that's the problem. It's a living, breathing document. You can't just start with it at the beginning of the year and then the last month of the year pull the plan out, start trying to get everything situated. It's something that's got to happen consistently, which once again takes a lot of effort when you start to talk about the data, the KPIs and things like that, right? But I think that with business plans over the years, right, when we're butting heads, it's because we didn't have everything together, automated, right? And then you got to get on the phone basically, and we all have quarterly business reviews, monthly business reviews, and you've just got to communicate that really, really well in those meetings and when you're talking to those individuals about the plan. And it shouldn't be something that you hit the plan once every month even. That's a living, breathing document. So you have to drive those business and those routes to market, right? And the changes that come about them in your program, in your marketing, right? In your products, right? So you have to continue to work through and communicate that via a dashboard with the right data. Helps that process tremendously compared to having, once again, 7 spreadsheets at 7 different people's desks that you're trying to keep the data situated and having those conversations, because you're not always going to be in the room with everybody having the conversations. There's going to be different pieces going on around the business, the routes to market, and the individuals that are actually talking to the partner. So I think that's the key.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rick. Yeah, and I think what I take away from that is that the one key thing is that people understand that the business plan is, as you said, it's very well, it's a living, breathing thing. It's always changing, because guess what? Business is always changing. The world is always changing. It's never, you said it in January and it's the same in December. There'll be, a million changes along the way that have to be managed. And I suppose that's where you just can't, especially as your channel scales up. And we're talking to 2 companies here that have very large channels, right? Thousands of partners in the ecosystem. It's not possible for people to deal with it. So just kind of,
Ken, that's where you bump heads, right? So you start at
yeah.
the beginning, you don't bring that business plan up, you don't change with the business. Then when you go to that business plan 9 to 10, 11 months later, and you're trying to bring up all the things that have changed and that understanding of what you started with, what's in the plan, and if you're not doing that properly, that's where you're butting heads, right? Because you're not on the same page. The understanding is different than what you agreed to at the beginning compared to what you're driving at the end.
Yeah, no, that's great, Rick. So Seán, Jessica, just kind of, there's a lot, Rick unpacked a lot there. Anything, Jessica, I'll start with yourself. Anything from your point of view that you want to kind of chime in with there?
Yeah, I would just say what's worked well for us is defining those KPIs and those structures has been very helpful, because again, every partner is different and everyone's going to have a little bit different objectives, right? But the business should have some commonality, right? Some metrics that we want to measure success against. So for us, again, like that top partner tier, we define what those KPIs are going to be. And yes, there's got to be flexibility. Every partner's got to have their own way of going about things. Yes, we have to revisit the actual tactics throughout the year, but we should still we feel consistently drive towards whatever those 3 KPIs are for the year, because those typically don't change. So that's one thing I just think has worked great for us, to find those things up front, but then give yourself that flexibility, right, to map to whatever the partner motions are or whatever needs to change throughout the year.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And like one of the things we do to deal with that, I suppose, and again, it is automation, is around, we call them templates, because you said it there, Jessica, and it kind of triggered a thought to share with me is, not all partners are the same. What we have a great saying, all partners are important, but not all partners are equal, right? They're very different, and even their sales motion can be very different, and how fast they do things can be very different. So when you're doing business planning, with automation, you can have actually many different types of business plans. You could have a suite of business plans for your distributors, another suite for your MSPs, another one for your VARs, and I can keep going. And even within those segments, not every VAR or disty is the same either. Some are on your lower end, some are on your top end, some are just onboarded last year, some are with you 20 years. So you have to think about, the ecosystem is very broad and varied, but having an automated business planning platform that allows you to do those templates that are a better fit, because there is definitely no one size fits all. Having the template where you can roll out business plans really quickly with the KPIs that suit the segment that the partner sits within is something that's really powerful. Seán, I don't know, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, before you jumped in with that, it's really an area that's, either, lends itself to automation or is crying out for automation, right? It's, as Rick called out there, when you've got those multiple routes to market, you've got multiple KPIs potentially, how do you manage that, and how do you make it visible to so many different interested parties, right? Be it in the partner, be it in the vendor. It really is an area that, as I said, lends itself to automation. It's something that benefits greatly from automation, and people who use the platform obviously benefit from that. So yeah, absolutely. It's such a manually complex thing that it can be very quickly spun up into a platform and automated with a lot of associated benefits.